Right now, Teddy Atlas joins me and Pete Thompson on a Tuesday with Thompson for another an interesting perspective, I'm sure, Teddy, as you wrote over at ESPN.com just the other day that you bet on Ali to beat Frazier in their first fight, and you said there was something magical about Ali, and I would love to hear, in your mind, what made him a magical figure.
Well, as far as, referring to what you just touched on, that story, my first connection with Ali was when I was about 14 years old or so, and I had seen him as an athlete. I had seen him as a fighter. I saw I saw what was brilliant talent. I mean, just scintillating talent, Nova-like talent. And when you're 14, you're impressed. I think you're impressed at any age, actually. But when you're 14 and you see somebody that does things better than you've ever seen it done before, it strikes you. Years later, I remember seeing Bo Jackson run with the football, and I really thought a little bit about Ali. I said, wow, that's kind of like the first time I saw Ali. I've never seen anyone run with the football that way. And when I saw Ali, with his speed, his charisma was part of it, his presence in the ring, he just took over that ring. But how fast his legs and his hands were. And again, it was just like he was light years above everybody else. I had never seen anybody that just shined that way in that kind of in that arena. But I also understood that he had said that he would not go into the Army, and I was a 14-year-old kid. I didn't understand the ideology to it, any of the philosophical thoughts to it, the politics towards it. I just understood that other people had to go, and why didn't he go? And then when he explained that it was against his beliefs, his religious beliefs, but more importantly to me was, because that can just be an excuse, but then when he said, take away everything, take it all, I'm willing to give it all away. And I understood at that point, what it took to be a fighter. I understood the risk it took to get into the ring that were inherent, and I understood the pain that you had to go through to get to that level of a fighter, the sacrifices, the things you had to give up. And after all that, everything he had earned and he had worked to earn, he was willing to give it up for his beliefs. And he was willing to be taken to jail. And then he said something else. He said, I'm willing to die. And he was putting his money where his mouth was, because he was going to lose everything. And I believed him. And at that point in my life as a 14-year-old kid, I had been around some things that were difficult. I had gotten in a little bit of trouble on the streets. I got into trouble later on, more so, and I finally got myself to the right place, fortunately. But I had been involved with things that I had done some things that were wrong. You have to take accountability for those things. And then I found out that some of the other people were not taking the same accountability. They said that they would, but then when push came to shove, they didn't. And I didn't trust people. I didn't trust what they said, because when the pressure came, when the moment came, they went away from what they said. They did what was convenient. They did what was easiest. And when this man said, I'm going to do this, I believed him. And I saw that he was doing it. So when he told the world later on, I was listening, that he was going to beat Joe Frazier, this was coming from a man that had been tested in my mind, a man that wasn't the other people that said things, and then when it became difficult, you couldn't trust him. I trusted him. I believed him. I said, I believe he's going to do that. So I felt it seemed like an idea then, as a 14-year-old, to go out and bet $120 I didn't have. Because it seemed like a pretty damn good idea, because, of course he would win. And, of course, it took me about 2 weeks I learned my next lesson. You have to pay your debts. And you have to find a way to pay your debts. And it took me about 2 weeks. I did find my debts, but it started a very, very different relationship with me and Muhammad Ali.
Teddy Atlas is with us here on the Sports Passion. Teddy, one of the things I know when you were writing about Muhammad Ali was to say a play in 2 acts almost, and how much Muhammad Ali had to reinvent himself. Can you tell us a little more about that and Ali just continuing to reinvent himself both in and outside the ring?
Yeah, there was definitely a change, a transition, a metamorphosis, whatever you want to call it. the funny thing is, he always talked about float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. The first act was a butterfly. The second act, he went in reverse. He became a morph. He wasn't flown like a butterfly, but he was a morph with a great chin. He was a very special morph. And really, his first act was all about talent. I had never seen that kind of ability. I don't know that anyone had ever seen that kind of ability. Forget about it in the heavyweight. I never saw that kind of combination partnership of leg and hand speed and reflexes in a lightweight, much less a heavyweight. And not only that, but he was a pioneer. He truly did make that cliche true when you say that he walked to the beat of his own drummer, because he just made it up as he went along. He made wrong right. He took the 101 boxing book and threw it in the garbage, because you were supposed to keep your hands up and block punches. You were supposed to move your head to the side and slip punches. You weren't supposed to have your hands down and pull away from punches. He did everything wrong, but his genius was that he made it right. He made it work for him. So the first act, the first part of the life of Ali was just pure talent, pure ability that was at a higher level than had ever been seen before. The second act was about something that we never knew that he possessed. It was about will. It was about pure will, because the skills had eroded. The 3.5 years that he was away from the ring because of his exile, because he refused to go into the Army, induction into the Army. I mean, he never had that ability again. It was never close to that young Ali, but he had a will that we had never known that he had, and that will took him through the second act and really made him the icon that he is, and the reason we're talking about him today.
Teddy, I know the Philadelphia media, I read some of the articles in the Philadelphia Inquirer, and some guys who were around and went up to Deer Lake and went up to the Poconos, and one guy wrote about, I think it was Dick Girardi, wrote about seeing Ali, he's just getting punched. He's punching away, and they're wailing away on him, and then later on the fight happened, and he came to realize, I was watching preparation for the rope-a-dope before I even knew what I could call it.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's different parts to that, too. There are some athletes, even some businessmen and people in boardrooms that are not as good in the meetings as they are when the light turns on. They're just not, because that's their moment, and that's where they're special. Ali was never that good in the gym anyway, but when the moment came, part of what translated into greatness was mentally where he was, above anybody else, handling the moment, being prepared for the moment, living for the moment, always knowing the moment was going to be his, having that confidence, that supreme confidence that very few people have. But at that point, it speaks a little bit to what I just described. He no longer had that ability to float around the ring and to evade punches and to do it for 15 rounds. So he was doing what he had to do. He was blocking punches, and trying to block as many as he could, but taking the ones that he had to take. And again, he had built up a will that allowed him to take punches, at a level higher than, put it this way, at a very high level. We'd seen fighters with great chins. Rocky Marciano had a great chin, different guys, but he had been on the floor. He got off the floor. We had never really, in the second act of Ali, we had never really seen anybody with that granite, concrete-type chin at the same time with the level of talent and the level of achievement that he had. We've seen a lot of guys that we called like Tex Cobb, and I'm not demeaning him in any way, but Tex Cobb, I'm not going to call him a catcher, but a real tough guy, honorable that he could get in the ring and do something that's very difficult, but he was a guy that walked through punches and couldn't win at a certain level because of that. Ali won at the highest level, and he still had a chin that just wasn't common with a guy of that eliteness. It wasn't connected with that, and now he was showing us that. And I think that the way where the physical abilities he worked at, but they were God-given, they were genetic. I mean, not everyone has those kind of abilities, but the other was developed. The will, the testament, the resolve That was developed. And I think it was developed by choices in life. I think it was developed by the choices he made when he said, no, I'm not going to the war because I believe in this, and I'm willing to test myself. I'm willing to put myself against the wall. I'm willing to sacrifice myself. I'm willing to be threatened. I'm willing to lose something, to lose everything. And when you're willing to do that and you test yourself and you put yourself through those kind of fires, you become stronger. You become a person possessed of a will and a strength that's not common. And he showed that. He used that later on. That was, even though he was out of the ring, he was still in training. See, that for me, that's the magical part about it, and the journey of him is that during those 3.5 years, yeah, he was out of the gym, but he was still in training. He was training for his second life, his second career, a career that was going to take a kind of will to get through it that had to be special, had to be forged. And he forged that will, and he used that will in Zaire. Yeah, he blocked punches, yeah, he caught the rope-a-dope, but really what it was about was he could make a better choice under pressure of what he had to do than Foreman could. Foreman wasn't mentally ready to make that choice.
We're talking with Teddy Atlas, of course, here on the Sports Bash. You a trainer. Angelo Dundee was his trainer. We had Angelo was live with us back in 2009 in an interview we did with him, and he said Muhammad thought every time he was going into a fight that he was going to a party. And it sounds like that is the mentality that made him such a larger-than-life guy, was that he wasn't overcome by the moment. And you chronicle some of the top moments you thought that he had. And I guess that mentality is what made him come out on top in these level of fights, was that he was able to be bigger than that moment.
Yeah, I mean, he had supreme confidence. He believed it's whatever you have to grab onto. As long as you grab onto it and you get there. All that matters is where do we get. And he grabbed onto whatever he had to. He grabbed onto a faith, to a belief that he was born for these moments, that he was here for a purpose, and that was the purpose, to accomplish these great things, these things that put you under tremendous stress and tremendous threat and tremendous pressure, but that it was meant for him to handle those things. Because later on, it was going to put him in a position where he could carry a message. It was going to put him in a position where he could get people's attention for different reasons, and he could show the reason for that success by being able to live a certain kind of life. And he couldn't live that kind of life. He couldn't get people to listen to him if he didn't have that success. So he believed in some ways that, I don't know if the word's protected, but that he was put into that for that reason, for that, and that gave him a certain confidence, a certain belief that he could get through, whatever he had to get through. And he was also a person that he understood. We're all influenced by different things as we evolve, and he understood that there was an entertainment value to it. See, when people say, is he the greatest? I give a funny, it sounds like convoluted, but for me it's very clear, the answer. I say, I got fighters higher up as far as the all-time great fighters like Sugar Ray Robinson, Henry Armstrong, Archie Moore. Some of these guys had 300 fights. Some of them had 120 knockouts. That's incredible. It's crazy. But so I put some of them higher up as the list of greatest fighters of all time, yet I can see calling Ali the greatest. And people say, then how can you do that? Because it encompasses more than just what was done in the ring. He crossed over. He transcended boxing. And also, I can clearly, in my mind, say that he was the greatest ambassador the sport ever had. He was the greatest promoter, not Don King, not Bob Arum. He was the greatest promoter the sport ever had. And he brought attention to the sport. That means he made the sport greater. And if he made the sport greater, then it's okay to call him the greatest.
Teddy Atlas is with us here on the Sports Bash. So you talk about transcendental. What in your mind then did make him special away from the ring and away from boxing, all those things? Some specifics.
Well, standing up to what he believed in. We all like to feel we can stand up to it, but then when the threat comes, sometimes we give in. We submit. We make excuses. We hide in the corner. We let it pass. He stood up for what he believed, and he was willing to pay the price, the ultimate price. Be what you believe you want to be. believe enough in your purpose and in whatever your cause is to take what comes with it, to show that belief, to live by that belief. In that way, he showed us how to stand up and take responsibility for what we said we wanted to do and what we think our purpose is. I think that was a great part of it. I think that also, he, by coming back after the loss, he kind of made himself more human. He let us all know that even very talented guys can lose. But what do you do after you lose? After he lost that fight to Frazier, I think there was a lot of people that were jealous of him. And I'll explain what I mean. Like, they didn't know whether or not they should really admire him or respect him to a high level, because they figured that he was just more luckier than them. He was born with these gifts, and they weren't born with these kind of gifts. I mean, he was born with speed and reflexes and just uncanny ability, and we're not born with those things. And then when he got dropped by Frazier, it wasn't about those things anymore. It was about something that we can all have. It was about a decision. What am I going to be now? What am I going to do now? How am I going to act? How am I going to behave? And we all understood that. We all immediately understood we can all do that. We can all decide to behave a certain way, even if we can't throw our hands as fast as him or move our feet as well as him. But we can all make a choice. And I think that connected with us, and that really crossed over to us and let us respect him in a different way, that here's a guy that's not talented anymore right now. This is a guy who's got his backside on the floor, but he's deciding, I'm going to get up. I'm going to behave a certain way.
Teddy Atlas, before we run, we looking at your list over at ESPN.com, I know they made you have an assignment to give the 5 greatest fights. You went with 6. Can you give our listeners maybe the top 1 or 2 in your mind? Because there's so many great ones, but from your perspective, which one stood out to you?
Well, I mean, there's one that just showed you what I'm talking about. I mean, the one that was like the first time that I heard Ray Charles sing America the Beautiful. I mean, when I heard that, it just did something to me. It was like, wow. It's like a revelation almost, that someone could sing it and move you that way. And the first time that I saw Ali with Cleveland Big Cat Williams, he was a big puncher. Listen, he wasn't as good as he used to be, but he was still a big, dangerous guy. And Ali was just at his peak of ability, and he was so fast, it was like a blur. And the punches were so accurate. It was almost like they were guided by lasers. And it was just incredible. And I just saw, and again, it's not like he was beating the greatest fight in the world, but he was beating a guy that was a big, formidable guy that was a power puncher. And it's the way he did it. And with the grace and the smoothness, it was like, wow, I never saw anything like it with that kind of ability. And then later on, you switch now to the end of his career, or towards the end of his career, and the fight in Manila. Look, he was involved in so many historic fights, but the fight in Manila, that fight, to me, if you're going to become an icon, if you're going to become immortal, I hate to say it this way, but you have to suffer. And he really suffered. Him and Frazier suffered that night. Maybe they suffered too much. And they went into the ring, and they came out of it with pieces of themselves still in the ring. And it was such a brutal, brutal, brutal fight. When you saw that, it had to impact you and affect you. And it impacted and affected me.
You think if Frazier had come back out and answered the bell, that Ali wouldn't have come out?
I believe that he would have, because that's why it was Ali. I believe he felt what we all felt, to get out of there and to give in, to quit. We all feel that sometimes in life. We do. Somebody listening right now to your radio says, Teddy, I don't feel it. You're a liar. All that matters is what you do. But you do feel it. You're not human if you don't feel it, if you're not tempted by giving in when there's a reason to give in. Of course you feel it. But then our character, the molding of what we are, the experiences that we've gone through, the things that we want to stand for, then they come forward. And then we grab a hold of ourselves and we make a choice. And that's what I have to believe, because Ali had made the right choices throughout his life. I have to believe, he thought about quitting. He said that in Sports Illustrated. He thought that it was the closest thing to dying. He said all those things. I didn't think I could get up off the stool. He would have got up. He would have felt everything that we just talked about, and he talked about. But then when the moment came, he would have got up.
Teddy Atlas, and as we know, in that great battle, Joe Frazier's trainer, Eddie Futch, said, no more. That's it for us.
But Ali said, this is the closest I've ever been to,
Teddy Atlas, American boxing trainer, and, of course, ESPN boxing analyst. Great work, great stories, Teddy, and I implore everybody to go to ESPN.com and read his take on Muhammad Ali. Thank you so much, Teddy.
My pleasure, guys.